When you think about the complexities of building several iconic brands, could you talk about your headphones to grills adventure
Yeah,
and entrepreneur and what we could learn as students of that disruptive revolution around finding a better way or having a greater impact on our community of customers and connecting with them in special ways?
yeah, so it's interesting. When I first saw Traeger, my initial response was, "Ooh, this is not for me." It's like it's bent steel, it's bent and welded steel, it's wood, it's commoditized. And then I started to think about the market opportunity, and then I stepped back and I said, "This is exactly my perspective on headphones." When we launched Skull Candy, it's like headphones have been around for 70 years, and they were black goods on the back wall of Best Buy. They were uninteresting. There was no brand, and no one had innovated the product. And we came with a very different perspective. Fast forward, I get involved in Traeger, and everyone's like, I think they're feeling sorry for me. It's like people are saying, "What are you doing? Like Skull Candy was so cool." And it's almost like, this is the best you could do next. And I said, "No, trust me." It's like, there's something really interesting. And what I loved about it was that the space was big. It hadn't innovated for decades. But when you think about what food means to people and how food is evolving, as it just from a secular trend perspective, it was perfect. And it's perfect because you use the word community. Food really is about inclusiveness. Food is
Mhm.
about bringing people together around a table, and like the common thread is it's food. It's like it's an experience. And when you share food, and especially when you share food that you've prepared yourself, suddenly it's personal, and
Yes.
it creates a conversation. So I sort of looked at it, and I remember when I gave my grandmother, who's almost 99 years old now, I gave her a pair of
Wow.
Skull Candy headphones. And it's like, my grandmother was never buying Skull Candy headphones. Like, it was the furthest thing. And she took them because they were free and she liked them. And it was always funny to see her wear them. But my grandmother loves her Traeger, and she cooks on her Traeger. And so I said, you know what? We span from, a late teen, early 20-year-old man, woman in any country around the world buying his or first grill, to my
Yep.
grandmother who's 99, who loves food and has learned to cook things that she didn't learn in her first 98 years of life because a Traeger brings that to her. And I just said, like, food is the common denominator. So what if we were to disrupt this space and actually build a brand that's really important to people, that brings people together?
Mm. That's beautiful.
Guys, there's so many examples. I want to share a couple of examples. And
Please.
these are examples that I haven't thought about since like 5 o'clock this morning as I was spinning on my Peloton. The Skull Candy was born of disruption. It's like it was like Skull Candy actually wasn't a headphone company initially. It was an integrated electronics business. We integrated mobile phone and mobile music technology into snowboard helmets. We eventually became a headphone company, but that was a very disruptive concept at the time. And then we built our first headphone, which was called the Skull Crusher. And it's called the Skull Crusher because you put this thing on your head, and like these subs, just it's got four speakers, not two. And it's like you're bleeding bass out your eyeballs. There's so much bass. And so when you're listening to hip hop, it's the coolest experience ever. And so those were the first two things that we did. And then I look at the last things that we did, and you know what? They were really boring. And I remember how we developed them. We sort of we looked at MPD data, and we looked at price points, and we looked at what was moving and what wasn't. And you know what? No disruption happens from looking in the rearview mirror at data around what other people are doing in the industry. And I had this realization a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, that we went from like taking risk and being disruptive to building this asset that had a lot of value and being really smart and swinging and bunting as opposed to swinging big. And it's not to say that you don't bet the farm on every product that you launch, but we had lost this like this disruptive, calculating, risk-taking DNA, and I didn't realize it till I looked back. And this is why Skull Candy grew from nothing and it just kept growing. And then we got to $300 million. And by the way, 7 years later, and I've been out for 7 years, it's about a $300 million brand. And by the way, I built disruption and then I went to optimization mode. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about one of the mistakes I made was we got valuable, we became successful, and so we played it safe. And I honestly, if you'd asked me then, are you playing it safe? I would have said no. Like we're driven by consumer insights. And so when you get under the hood at Traeger right now, I'm not saying that there's not a lot of data. And we spend a ton of time with consumers in habitat, surveying, hanging out in their backyards and in their kitchens, but we never develop based on what the market's doing. All of our innovation, like they start as these wacky ideas, then we say, it's not quite right. What about this? What about this? And that to me, it's like, that pattern is working. And I've loved that part of it. One of the things that we're talking a lot about recently is it's packaging. And it's like in packaging, and especially if you think about our pellets, for example, inside a bag of pellets, a consumer is going to say they all look the same. And the reality is they're not, and we know that. But packaging is such a meaningful component. And we've been talking about packaging for 7, 8, 9 months. And the team internally is like, they're looking at me and saying, Jeremy, are you ever going to make a decision? And my response is, yeah, when we get to the right answer. And there are two things I look at and I say, you know what? I will always speak my mind when my gut is like really strong on an issue. And if it's not right, we're not launching it. And we've been through a dozen versions of packaging and like form factor, materialization, recyclability, all sorts of things. And I think we're almost there, but I'm simply, what we have is working. It needs to be better. But if we launch it and it's worse, shame on me.
When you think about that, such an important process of pattern recognition, and in fact, in your first example, talking about how we will tend to rely so much on the customers that we've already obtained to reinforce what we already know, and therefore unwittingly become complacent or risk averse because we're sticking with what we have and not continuing to grow or scale.